17 minutes past 5 now. Since 2002, teachers have been required to fill in forms giving details of any racist incidents involving children in their schools. The Race Relations Act of 2000 put public bodies under a duty to eliminate discrimination. But a report today by the Manifesto Club, a civil liberties organisation, says that reporting like this is wasting teachers' time, it's interfering in everyday children's behaviour and can actually create racial divisions where none exist. The report author is Adrian Hart. PM brought him together with Jane Lane, who researches racial equality in very young children. She's written the book Young Children and Racial Justice. I started by asking Adrian Hart why he's so concerned that small children are being punished for making racist insults.
Well, the first thing I would say is that we simply don't need this kind of top-down official anti-racism in schools. Kids are instinctively colourblind and they're more ethnically mixed than ever before. In many ways, they can do anti-racism all by themselves. And the problem is that teachers feel under government pressure to find racist behaviour that isn't there.
Well, Jane Lane, do you think, you work with very young children, don't you? Do you think that perhaps some adults, best intentions, but they're almost feeding a racist attitude which isn't there, which is what Mr. Hart seems to be suggesting?
Some people working with young children will behave inappropriately with them and deal with incidents in a punitive way. Now, as far as I'm concerned, as far as people I know in the early years are working, there's no question at all of being punitive, of punishing people in any way or condemning people. It's about listening carefully to what children might be saying or doing and questioning and working with them as to whether something might happen if a word is used or someone won't play with someone else, trying to find out the reason for it in a sensitive, appropriate, caring way, which one does with young children on all walks of life.
So how do you do that? How do you do that without making the issue even bigger?
Well, first of all, depending what the instance is, very difficult to generalise, because if a specific instance occurred and if we're talking about two particular children who were playing together quite happily and one calls another an offensive word, if I was working with the children, or people working in the early years were working with children, they would want to know whether they understood what that word meant, whether they understood, whether they knew that that particular word was offensive.
So, Adrian Hart, how do you respond to that?
It certainly doesn't. It doesn't work with my experience working in schools, and I think it's very patronising to think children aren't resilient. The trouble is, encouraging victimhood doesn't help. Children insult each other for all sorts of differences. And I disagree with Jane about, I think that Britain is less racist and more tolerant than it has been, certainly compared to my...
It was more racist.
Well, you
didn't say that.
You talk about society as a sort of... You talk about society in the sense that it is conditioned by racism, that children are conditioned by sort of an endemic, kind of almost permanent condition of racism.
And are you saying that racism has gone away?
I'm certainly not. Of course, racism hasn't gone away. What I'm saying is,
and has it changed since in the last 20, 30 years?
It absolutely has. Look, in more and more primary schools, children are inventing a version of multi-ethnic, multicultural harmony that could teach the adult world a thing or two.
Absolutely,
Don't look to children. Don't look to children for racism. That belongs in the adult world. Jane, you seem to, in some of your writing, view children as either hapless victims or as bad seeds. I think this is kind of... I really wish you did spend more time working in playgrounds as I do, because the playground is a messy place, OK? It's fizzing with friendships, falling out, making up, teasing, banter. Of course they insult each other. They're
Jane
kids.
Lane? Well, of course, first of all, in the early years there aren't playgrounds, and so this is the difference between early years and primary school. And of course there's lots of banter going on, and that's absolutely vital that one never assumes that it's negatively intended. But it's very important to find out where its origins, if there are negative ones, are coming from. And in terms of racism, the racism exists in our society. Children must be part of that learning process about racial prejudice. They must be. How can they not be?
So, Adrian Hart, finally, what's wrong then with trying to nip it in the bud?
Why are we assuming that teachers aren't doing that? I'm saying let's trust schools a little bit more and stop racializing. But I also want to kind of like just say to Jane about the early years stuff. I find it absolutely lamentable that this stuff is now trying to push its way into the nursery. Children are instinctively colourblind, and Jane's comments
but
about...
the evidence is contrary to that.
All right, Jane, I'm going to bring you in for a comment at the end. Just finish this point, Adrian.
The evidence is contested.
Finally then, Jane Lane, lots of points are being made there. How would you respond to the sort of criticism that Adrian Hart has been making?
There's plenty of research right up into this century which points to the fact that children are certainly recognising skin colour differences and in many circumstances learning to be racially prejudiced. I don't know how that is contested. In terms of recording incidents in primary school, I think it's very important that we have some sort of monitoring, but done sensitively and caringly and lovingly, in a sense, if one is thinking about the importance of children and where they're growing up from. But I don't agree that teachers at the moment necessarily are equipped to deal with this. And the evidence shows that. Teachers say they're not equipped to deal with situations, to deal with racism.
So you're saying there should be more training for teachers entering the profession?
Well, we need more training across the board, yes.
Jane Lane and Adrian Hart.